right, good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar on the status of financial planning and financial institutions. My name is Tim Kehrer. I'm with Kehrer Bielan Research and Consulting. We're happy to be hosting today's event. We're going to wait for just a couple of minutes to kick things off as we allow a few more folks to sign in. Thank you. While we are waiting for the room to fill up, there are a couple of things I'd like to let you know about. During today's event, there are going to be a number of panelists that will be on your screen throughout the 90 minutes. But we want all of you in the audience to get involved as well. And we've given you a couple of ways to do that. The best way to get a question to us and to join the conversation is to click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. I'll get a notification that'll allow me to bring you onto the panel. You'll have audio, you'll be able to speak, and if you're set up to do it, you can be on video as well. That'll allow you to ask a question of the panel, or if you have, if you've had something that that you'd like to share, we would love for you to jump in. If you'd prefer, you can also send us questions and comments via the chat function. We'll get started here in just another minute. All right, great. Welcome again to today's webinar on the status of financial planning and financial institutions. Ken, why don't you get us started?
Thanks, Tim. I'm Ken Kehrer, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the status of financial planning and financial institutions. This is a continuation of the Holistic Advisor virtual study group that we've been conducting ever since July. To begin, let us thank our sponsors, Ameriprise Financial Institutions Group and eMoney Advisors, both for their financial support and their thought leadership in helping us put this meeting together. And today's virtual conversation is brought to you by Terrapin Technologies. To jumpstart the discussion, we've invited some of your peers from the community to sit in on the virtual roundtable. David Bressler from Ameriprise Financial, Ben Ronning from Arvest, Brad Johans from Deere Employees Credit Union, Kelly Brennan from eMoney Advisor, Jess Donor from Johnson Financial Group, Tom Mudloff from United Wealth Management and United Brokerage Services, and we think Theo Trandifer from University of Wisconsin Credit Union, but he's been missing in action the last couple of days, so we're not sure he's got our invitation. Theo, if you're out there, please join us. In addition to Tim, we have a few members of the Kehrer Bielan team joining us. My partner, Peter Bielan, Lee Van Hewley, who directs our planning and planning consulting practice here at Kehrer Bielan. And lurking somewhere in the background, not on your screen, are Erica and Lacey, who can never put this meeting together without their help. Let's start out by level setting our understanding of where we are in terms of how much planning bank-based advisors are doing. Fewer than half of financial institutions appear to track how much planning their advisors do, and in our experience, they do a better job. Those that do track do a better job of tracking new plans created, but not a very good job of knowing how much active planning their advisors doing with folks who had a plan created some time ago. So at Kehrer Bielan, we decided to rely on data that we get from the financial planning software firms to tell us exactly how many plans typical advisors are doing. What you see on the screen is data from our new annual service that benchmarks financial planning activity on an advisor level, that is advisor by advisor. And these data encompass over 3,000 advisors from over 700 financial institutions. So it's a really good benchmark of what advisors are really doing. So we took these advisors and counted the amount of new plans they did during the year, as well as the number of plans they updated. And then we sorted them by how many did none, how many did between 0 and 1 a month, between 1 and 2 a month, and so on. As you can see, this chart is tilted way to the left. 72% of these 3,000 advisors engage in planning with no more than 2 clients a month. So that's where we are. Only 6% do more than 6 a month. So let's turn to the group around the virtual table and ask, how much planning should you expect an advisor to do? Ben, how about your advisors? How much do you expect them to do?
Did you say Ben? I'm sorry, Ken.
Yeah, Ben.
Yeah. So are you talking about, is your question about planning goals in itself?
Well, you have 100 and some advisors, right? How much plans do you expect them to do? How much should you expect them to do?
Well, right now we just have a baseline goal, and it's to do 2 plans a month per advisor, and we have up to 4 goals. Well, at 4 goals on average per plan. But that's where we're at with our metrics, and it's a very basic metric. I mean, we could actually increase that quite a bit, but those stats that you just showed are pretty telling. I believe setting financial planning goals it's important for those that are goal oriented in general. I believe accountability is paramount to success, but the purpose behind the goals has to resonate with associates. I mean, if there isn't a transparent why, or let's say I'm not adequately trained to do financial planning, it's going to be tough to do that. Associates can view this as something that's required that isn't relevant. I think that could be part of it. But from a financial planning perspective, I believe that setting financial planning goals are relevant for those who has or one who truly has the intent of having a true financial planning practice. If you measure this metric for a large percentage of advisors who aren't inherently planners or don't truly believe in planning, then it's a metric that's not going to be measured correctly. Now, I'll tell you, I don't have any formal research to back this up, but to me, it's just a common sense way to think about it and measure it. I mean, again, otherwise you get the results that you found. And I guess my question to this question is, are the organizations that we're measuring, are they financial plan organizations, or do they intend to be financial plan organizations? And the reason why I pose that question is because in my experience, if you try to force something that's not true, or if there's competing priorities, then you don't get the intended results that you're hoping for. There has to be buy-in across the board before the result of this measurement is relevant. And I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I believe a proper incentive tied to planning goals could be effective.
Well, it does sound like you're not expecting your advisors to do much. Uh, um, Jess, how about you? What's your, uh, what do you expect of your advisors?
I'd say that the hope is that they're doing financial planning with every client that's probably over age 50 and pre-retirement or in the retirement. Unlike Ben, I only have 13 advisors, so it's a different team that I'm managing. But I'm pretty lucky and fortunate that planning really is part of our culture at Johnson Financial Group. So I don't set any goals for them. They set their targets. But when I looked at your chart that you had up there, probably a third of the team are doing 4 to 6 plans a month. A third of the team are doing 6 or more. And then the other third, it's probably 0 to 4. They don't get as much into the robust planning, but more if the situation really calls for it, they'll get into it. But for the most part, just planning it's who we are. It's what we do. Within our organization, our private bankers are creating plans. Our wealth advisors are creating plans. So, I was at a previous organization in which it was much more probably a carrot and the stick approach. And, some people really would respond to that because they wanted the incentive that went along with it, or they didn't want to, get on a naughty list for not completing the plans. But yeah, here at Johnson, it's part of how we approach everything with our clients. We find that our clients, they really want to have that plan. And, the way that I do position planning with the clients or with the advisors is I really want to have that plan at the center of the conversation, not to have the account at the center of the conversation. So then you can just talk through them, whether it be COVID or whether it be as they're in their last days before they get to retirement, they can see if they're on track or not on track. And it leads to a lot better, healthier conversation than if you have just kind of a old-fashioned account-centric kind of conversation like we would have had 10, 20 years ago.
Dave?
Yeah, so thanks, Ken. So we're at Ameriprise, we're a little bit off, I think, the far right of the spectrum here. So I think financial planning is, part of what Ameriprise, I think, is our brand is. So our sort of expectation is that every client with over $100,000 in assets with us has some form of a financial planning relationship with us. And we're about 75% of the way there. So I don't want to say we're all the way there. About 3/4 of those folks do. And it takes two forms. We have a foundational, what we call foundational plan, which is really about tracking the client's key goals and getting that online so the client can see in real time how they're doing. And then for the right client, it's an upgraded experience, comprehensive advice. And about 30, 40% of clients choose to do that. I heard a couple of discussions around incentives. So we don't have a stick. We've never had a stick, but we do have incentives. So we have two forms of incentive. One is we have a payout related to advice. And then this year we introduced actually something interesting that the group would probably like to hear about. So we introduced something called an experience award, which has no monetary value. And it really is just like a thing you can put on your advisor website and, in your email footer, which is we're measuring the client experience in a couple different ways for each of the advisors. And if they meet a certain benchmark, series of benchmarks, financial is one of them, they can call themselves an Ameriprise Client Experience Award winner, but no money, like zero money. And people are chasing this award that has no monetary value, but just so that they can deliver an extraordinary experience. So that's been really interesting for us. That money helps, but also recognition in and of itself, maybe that we're looking for.
Theo, how about you? What's kind of your expectation of your advisors?
So thank you, Ken. For us, we don't have any goals for the advisors. For the longest time, we did not have a good way to track plans other than just to see how many plans were in our system. But we have added a planning column in our CRM so that we can see the percentage of our clients that have a plan and don't have a plan. So going forward, we'll be able to track. And what we plan on doing in starting with 2021 goals is to have a benchmark of where the advisor is and where we expect the advisor to be. So it's going to be more a percentage of the client book going forward than just expecting a shared number of clients that have financial plans. For most of our advisors, the process in bringing in a prospect is to start with a financial plan. So we transitioned from Money Tree to Mighty Guy Pro about 2.5 years ago. And it's part of the process that every advisor, as they meet with a prospect, now they're expected to start off with a financial plan. Of course, as long as it makes sense. So we're looking for assets over $250,000 or more requires a plan.
Tom, how about in your shop?
Good afternoon, everyone. So we do track. I get a report every month that shows how many total plans you have, how many you've done that month, what you've done year to date, et cetera. We also have another kind of subset of tracking, which is key households. So we define key households as those with 250,000 and up in investable assets. So then we can see the penetration of how many of your key households have plans. Obviously, we'd like to see, we don't require it, but we'd like to see a higher percentage of your key households have plans than your overall book. And that gets, somewhat challenging to track with some advisors because where they live and how a key household gets defined, we can't expect everybody to have the same penetration or the same number of key households. But I would say that we don't require it. We've encouraged it. We don't incent it. Our advisors that have embraced it, I think, have seen the benefits that we're all familiar with. But we usually use it as a conversation that's part of the overall check-in with where are you versus goals? Are you growing year over year? Where's your managed money adoption and things like that? We find that all kind of fits in together. And the advisors that are using planning, even if it's 1 or 2 a month, tend to have fewer of those conversations about have you adopted managed money? Are you growing your book year over year and everything else? And the advisors that are struggling are usually where we find they're not doing as much planning. We did have it's a great success story that I think everybody's probably seen in their own programs, but we're doing a lot more with virtual seminars. And one of our advisors did a seminar, very kind of high level, but mentioned he can do a plan. Somebody took him up on it, and it turned into $1 million relationship, bringing over money from Morgan Stanley, Edward Jones, basically consolidating all their assets because they had all these assets in different places and nobody's actually shown them what it looks like in a plan consolidated together in aggregate. So that's an easy success story, but those are the types of things we try to share with each other to get more people to adopt it on a more regular basis.
Kelly, were you raising your hand or you're just stretching?
I don't think I was raising my hand.
Okay, all right.
But I'll jump in here from a technology perspective if that works for you, Ken.
Sure.
Yeah, so at eMoney, our mission and kind of our vision is to help people talk about money. And one of our personal goals when we work with every new advisor or every new firm really is to ultimately lead them to making sure that every client has a financial plan in place. That's really what we're after. And a lot of the research and work that we've done with advisors has really led us to find that, one of the biggest barriers to planning is the training. So a lot of what we do when we work with firms is really help them create the right training model in partnership with eMoney or, whatever platform you're using to implement that policy. For us, it's really about, if we can loading the advisor and client data into the system before they get started so that, that can really bring a lot of the start of the plan to life. And then we tie in plan defaults, which will also help get us started on the plan. And then usually what we find works for firms is those first 90 days incentives for behavior changes. So, whether it be not even monetary, but just making it a competition, who can load in the most clients to the client experience and get at least one plan started for each. Those are the different tactics and habits that we've seen work really well as a software company partnering with a firm on this. kind of planning approach.
You should have raised your hand, right?
Yeah.
Brad, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would say we do, this is Brad with Deer Employee Credit Union. We track on both at the program level as well as at the individual advisor level. We have goals established for that, and we do that planning goal as part of our overall incentive comp, or from a bonus structure, is one of our 5 bonus metrics that we do. So, we firmly believe that everybody at every level with a member of the credit union should have some sort of a financial plan, whether it's a basic foundational plan or working through a retirement cash flow or full comprehensive plan. So we put a lot of focus in all of our meetings that we have with our members to lead with the plan, and that's going to allow us to get all the assets that we want to get.
Several of you have mentioned goals. And you looked at goals in the research we want to report on today, I think. Why don't you share some of that with us?
Yeah, thanks, Ken. What I'd like to do, kind of starting now, and you'll see this information kind of woven in throughout the rest of today's event, is share with you some of the findings from a forthcoming study, coincidentally titled "The Status of Financial Planning in Financial Institutions," sponsored by Ameriprise. Excuse me. That study, which you all should be seeing later this year, is based on data from 87 banks and credit unions that offer financial planning services. The survey itself asked them to detail not only the level of activity, that's what Ken referred to earlier, that it turned out that this group was better able to report on the number of new plans created in the prior year than on the total number of plans on the book, if you will. We also asked them to describe their financial planning delivery model to us. One aspect of which is whether or not the firm sets planning goals. As you can see, most of the firms that we surveyed do not set goals. 70% of them answered no to this question. And only 30% answered yes. Now, the obvious question might be, does setting a goal help to drive more financial planning activity? We were able to look at that. And it turns out the answer is that it doesn't seem to. Firms that set planning goals actually achieve lower new plan penetration than firms that don't set goals, and by a decent margin. You can see here while we're looking at the screen, we use 2 different measures of new plan penetration. One is to look at the level of new planning activity relative to the size of the bank or credit union in terms of the number of customer households. The other is to look at planning activity relative to the number of client households that are in the broker-dealer in the program. So this may raise some eyebrows out there. The fact that not only does planning does setting a goal not seem to move the needle on planning, it actually almost looks like it hurts. One reason for that may be because the goals that are being set are toothless. What we're looking at here is the same pie chart that you saw previously. You can see the 70% of firms in our sample that don't set planning goals. But I've broken out the 30% that do set goals among those that set a goal and penalize the advisor for failing to hit the goal. That's only 7% of the firms. Most of the firms that set a goal don't have any kind of penalty in place. So that may help to explain why it appears that setting a goal doesn't drive more plans getting done.
So Tim, what is an example of a firm? And I'm not sure if you're going to be able to answer this, but what would an example of a penalty be?
You know, I don't think I have a good example off the top of my head.
But I think though it also, this question also includes the absence of getting a reward as a penalty. So you're penalized if you don't get the spiff.
So Ken, if I could jump in, this one's interesting. I have a pretty strong perspective on this one. So we've worked really hard on business planning at the advisor level to instill a culture of everybody doing a business plan. So about 92% of our advisors do a business plan. It's totally optional. You know, they don't have to. They choose to. I think because for us at least, it leads to resources. So if you do a business plan and you tell us how you want to grow, we'll line up resources to help you do that. But I think what's really interesting about the study here is we don't set a goal for the advisor. We let them set their own goals. And it's a sort of different way of doing it, right? So what most advisors have a revenue goal because that's their paycheck. And we just try to make it really simple inside of our business planning tool online to have it be a really simple formula. So if you want to achieve growth in your business, it's one of two things. Either you need to do more with the clients you have, or you need to get new clients. Those are really the only two major levers you can pull. And you just do the math and you say, well, we always start with existing clients, and the biggest lever you can pull, we have all sorts of studies that say our planning clients drive significantly more revenue from flows, referrals, everything. So if you want to hit a revenue target, I suggest you do financial planning, and then you make a big difference in whatever you need to make up in terms of client acquisition. But we try to help them do the math and say, well, in order to achieve my revenue goals, I actually need to expand my planning business because I know what that will deliver. We have the stats that say it's really meaningful deltas between that and non-planning clients. So that's the way we go about it. And but it's letting the advisor choose their own adventure a little bit on their own business.
So I found it really interesting, your experience award.
Yeah.
And the fact that advisors, I mean, you know, monetary, the money is always good, as you said, but I think recognition is also really important. And I know when I was an advisor, we didn't have any goals, but what they did is they actually distributed out the leaderboard for financial planning. And it's really, I mean, I think just the fact that they want to be, they're so competitive that, you know, that is inspiring to them. And so because these top producers, you know, we have these top producer awards or these trips or whatever recognition you have for your top advisors. One of the things that I was just talking about with the regional manager today was, do your top advisors, do they still get that recognition as being a top advisor if they're not engaged in planning? Yeah,
so there's a couple of interesting things in there, and I'm glad you asked this because someone asked it in the chat as well. So just for frame of reference, the service award for us is we have a high watermark for % of clients that are in a goal-based advice relationship with you. We look at, we survey clients and we give kind of a net promoter score to every one of our advisors. So we look at that. And are you in positive net flows as a proxy for our, you know, people doing more business with you and choosing to engage with you versus somebody else? And it's really interesting because there's literally nothing attached to this. There's no trip, there's no trinkets, there's nothing. And what I go back to is, and my guess is lots of folks on the phone have kids. My 7-year-old will like play a video game on his iPad to no end to earn a badge or go up a level or whatever. And it's just the recognition of achieving that thing that keeps him like motivated in playing these games. And, you know, it's funny, our 65-year-old advisor plays the same game, right? And they want to win and they want to compete. And your question was about our top folks. The answer is yes. So they really want, because they've already put themselves in the upper echelon of our advisors, and any new thing that comes out, they want to achieve that before the other guys that they've sat on stage with at conferences for the last 30 years or 20 years or whatever it is. And advice is absolutely part of any of our kind of recognition programs. So not just this one, but our programs designed to have travel connected, all that stuff. Every part of it, advice is embedded in the culture. But it was really interesting for me, especially, I know there's some folks on the panel here that, economic incentives might be, but this type of incentive you can do with effectively no money. And it cost us like a few $1,000 in reporting, and that was it to administer.
Ben?
Hey, those good tidbits there with the leadership for financial planning, making it a competition. So going back to that research, is that based on financial planning organizations, or is it based on organizations that aspire to become financial planning organizations? The reason why I say that is David is at a firm that's a financial planning organization. He's also an IRA. So it's a different animal. So I want to go back to that research and understand I know we're looking at banks, but what are we really looking at there?
Well, we're looking at 87 banks, and with a wide variety of experience and ambitions. But as Lee recently wrote in a piece she published, almost all of those banks are walking the walk or talking the talk of being holistic, of having holistic advisors and doing planning, but they're not walking the walk. You saw the numbers. Most of those firms will tell you they're trying to be a holistic advice organization. And the numbers suggest that, at least on the planning core, they're not there yet.
Yep. Yeah, so we have the bank side and of course the AWM side. So there's competing priorities. So what I've done, and it's starting to come to fruition where our planning scope has gotten broader. There's more people doing planning, but those top priorities on the bank side versus the AWM side, they're conflicting. But what I've said is, hey, if you want to retain and acquire associates and clients, this has to be a focus. This will support those top priorities. And we're slowly moving in that direction. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that I had mentioned that we are moving the ability to track how many clients have a financial plan in our CRM. And I think that's a very important thing. I know, Lee, you've been working on different reporting as well. And from a management perspective, you cannot manage something you cannot track, you cannot measure. And I think that's the very important thing for our firms to see how you track it. How can you manage that? Because until you cannot track it correctly, you cannot manage it. And that's what we found in our practice, right? Similar to what you said, Ken, we held ourselves as, oh yeah, we do full-fledged financial planning for our clients. But then when we started looking at it, we couldn't verify that. And that's why we had to put some reporting in place so that we can track. And then once you track it, you can manage and you can keep people accountable, keep advisor accountable to certain goals. So that was one of my learnings in the last year, 2 years now that we've been really focusing on financial planning. And we had to put some things in place to track it. And I know, Lee, you're working on some other things as well from a tracking perspective. So I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, I think you make a great point that how do these regional managers who have, or even program managers, you've got so much on your plate, it's like, how can I add one more thing? So what we're trying to do is find a very simple way to get some insight into not only how many households you're engaging, but to get some idea of the content of that. So I appreciate you bringing it up. It's definitely work we think is really important and will help the adoption of good planning. But one of the things I have seen out there is I've seen firms that will set a goal and then they end up getting a lot of not great plans. They'll get the, just trying to check the box types of, and I'd love to get anybody's feedback. Has anybody had that same experience? And what do you do? How do you get the advisor to, or is it okay? So I'd love to hear anybody's thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I'll just jump in. We have had that challenge for sure, right? And we have it, we still have it today. So I think, one of the things we did was we introduced an advice team in our supervision department. And part of what they're doing is they're going in and reviewing. And what's really interesting that they're doing is they're not calling advisors and saying, shame on you, it's looking good enough. What they're doing is calling with coaching. And they're calling and saying, hey, you wrote your plan this way, or you put this language in there. Can I offer you some different language? I think it actually be a little more. That would actually help the experience. So they're not just calling to say, shame on you. They're calling you actually to say, I'm going to help you make it better. And just, take this paragraph that I wrote up for you, put that in instead of what you put in, and we think that would be a better. And then it's helping folks kind of train themselves to do a little bit better. But we have that as a back to ensure that, we really don't want any, we don't want those sort of like garbage.
Brad, did you have something? You look like you had something to share on
Yeah. This. Yeah, I think we all, I share David's comments there. I think we all get a fair share of kind of the garbage plans. I would say we've really tried to segment the plans and really look at the client engagement. We have a very strict process that we go through from a client review process and a segmentation of our book of business. So from an A plus, A, B clients, depending on what type of, where they get quarterly, semi-annual, annual reviews, and we track that. We track the financial planning alongside of that to make sure that, one, not only are we doing it, but we're keeping the client engaged. So we look at eMoney as far as the engagement we have with the client and how often they're logging into eMoney and how often they're logging into Account View with LPL. So we track that activity from that standpoint. So, but yeah, it's definitely a challenge. We do look at each of those different segments so we know where the opportunities and how many by program and by advisor of what percentage of our clients that don't have a plan that we either need to, one, make sure that they do have one, or two, make sure that we can document that they've opted out of it. So we put a lot of tracking from that standpoint to try to close that gap. But definitely, like everybody else, we're going to get some we wish we didn't have.
Right. And I know some firms that I've spoken with have said that they're okay with that, actually, right? We're trying to get advisors, they have to start somewhere. And if we don't get them even started on it, then, so they're talking about the muscle memory type of idea. Like they'll get better, but we have to first get them using the software, right?
Well, and I think one of the things where, if I look back over the last couple of years where we've made a real big change is, 3 years ago, we focused a lot of our efforts and conversation on the price and what somebody was paying for investment management, or what the fees were, and not so much of the value of the relationship and the value that we brought to that relationship with the client. So once we start focusing on the value rather than talking price, our engagement level changed dramatically, both at the advisor level and at the client level. So once they realize what the value we're putting in front of them, out of the 9 board members that we have with the credit union, 8 of them are clients of ours. Most of our leadership team are clients, and that, so having them see it and live the process with us, that's really trickled down to our membership as well.
Tim, several people mentioned incentives as opposed to goals. What are these 87 banks and credit unions do about incentives?
Yeah, so hopefully everyone can see my screen again. Yeah, we did ask those 87 firms, and relative to the number that set a financial planning goal, even fewer incent their advisors to do more planning. 14% of the 87 firms. Now, some examples of ways that they incent. Half of the firms that offer some kind of incentive offer bonus compensation. So they pay for planning, which is a little different than the group that's on your screen today. Nearly as many firms, around 40%, include planning as part of the scorecard, and another 40% use planning as one aspect to qualify for a reward or recognition. So, going to what Dave has been sharing with us. Those, we can sort of perform the same exercise with this data now that we did with the goals data a moment ago. Sort of test to see which model seems to be working better. In this case, it seems like the firms that incent planning do a lot more planning. You can see. Sorry about that. You can see they achieve 6 times deeper new plan penetration of the bank's customer households. So incentives appear to be a pretty effective lever to move the needle on planning. On the other hand, going back a couple of steps in the conversation, very few firms, relatively few firms, do any sort of quality control of those plans, right? Do a review of the plan. And that, of course, opens the door. If you're offering a financial incentive and you're not back checking the quality of the plan, it certainly opens the door to advisors checking the box.
And part of the of what Leah is trying to do with her new benchmarking service is to not look just at the number of plans, but some measures of quality of the plans. Lee, what measures are you using?
So right now we're looking at the number of goals that are used in a plan. Now we're going to be talking with some, I think this is going to evolve a little bit because we want to expand it to something more than just goals. But the point still is that if you have one goal, then it's just a retirement goal, because that's generally the most basic. Is that, do you know that client as well as if you knew that they wanted a new home and they had to send their kids to college and they're concerned about healthcare. So our understanding, and I think it's pretty widely accepted, is that you know your client better, you have a deeper understanding of them if you have more goals in the plan. And then if anybody has had a chance to chat with me, you probably also know I'm pretty passionate about the healthcare goal. And because I really think that if we do not include a healthcare goal, we're really underestimating the spending a client is going to need during their retirement years, which is not going to put them in a good position in the long term. So that's another measure that we use. But I think what we want to do, in fact, we're having conversations with eMoney and Naviplan. We want to get all these firms together so that we can expand our measures. So it's something that, I think that is going to be really, truly more representative of the industry. So I'm really excited to see how this might change for next year. But thanks for asking.
Mm-hmm. So Tim, let's change gears a little bit and get to our most frequently asked question in the planning space, and that is, does anybody charge for plans? How about these 87 firms, Tim?
Sure. Yeah. And, Ken, you're right. This is a question that we get a lot, and as it pertains to these 87 firms, relatively few of them do charge for plans. Two-thirds say that they never charge plans under any circumstances. The other 28% charge a fee some of the time, but most of those waive the fee if the client implements a part of the plan through the firm. So if the plan recommends the client purchase a fixed annuity and the client purchases the fixed annuity from the firm, then the firm may waive the fee in that case. And then 5%, so very few of the 87 firms, just a handful, say that they charge for the preparation of the plan in all cases. The fee that those firms charge, those firms that charge all the time or most of the time, varies quite widely. We spoke to one firm that charges as low as $500. There are firms that charge as much as several thousand. Many have kind of a sliding scale, if you will, where the fee for the plan is tied to the number of meetings per year that the advisor is going to hold with the client. So they might charge less for a plan with an annual review tied to it than they would for a plan with a biannual or quarterly meeting.
Well, let's ask the people around the table if they charge for plans.
Ken, yeah, this is Brad. Yes, we do charge for plans. We have we do it on a varying scale based on the client. We look at client assets and the engagement level with clients. We have several clients that are just planning only, so we'll charge strictly a planning fee to them. They have their investment management elsewhere. But typically, we're going to charge $750 for a retirement cash flow plan on an annual basis, and for a full comprehensive plan, anywhere from $2,500 up to, we've had a couple that are very complex that are up in the $6,000 range. So yeah, we do plan. Again, back to focusing on the value of the relationship and the value of of the process of what we do. I also have a full-time planner on our team as well, so the advisors aren't doing the plans themselves. I've got a full-time planner that puts the plans together, and we'll work with the advisor on the presentation of that. And so it's we just had really good success. Why do we charge for it? And one of the questions that I'd see pop up is we just feel the value of the relationship in keeping that client engaged. Our largest account that we pulled in the last 2 years came from a referral from our private banker that the client had multi-millions of dollars at Merrill Lynch, came in, was referred to us. The advisor and the planner met with him, kind of gave us some basic information to kind of test us out a little bit to see what we could put together. As we came back and made the initial presentation with the limited information we had, he sat down and looked at us and he said, "This is really good stuff." He next day walked in with a stack of about 50 statements of all his assets from everywhere, and has since moved everything over to us. So he said just the process of what we have and the plan, he was more than willing to engage, and he's one that we charge $6,000 a year for.
Tom, did you guys charge?
I had a quick question for Brad. And by the way, we do not charge for financial planning at this time, but I'm actually an advocate for it. So Brad, do you guys also do incentives? Is that?
We do have, it's part of our bonus plan. So our bonus metric for the advisors, there's 5 components. 2 of the 5 are credit union related, so we have very little control over. The other 3 are GDC, percentage of review meetings held, and financial planning. And that's what's part of our overall bonus metric.
I was just looking at some of this research you guys provide. I think it makes sense to consider those incentives for those that are doing higher level planning, because they're more likely to be, it's part of their business, part of what they do. And the numbers back it up to where you can say, hey, let's pay for these advisors that are doing a higher level of planning for sure. I think those two can go hand in hand. Yeah, I'm an advocate for that, for higher level planning. I think you can still do it at lower level planning, but I think it should be quite a bit less based on your research.
So Ben, because in your previous life, did you ever charge for planning?
I did. So I've been at RIA, I've been at banks. So we did do that, and it was a couple different ways. So one way was just like Brad had described, it's a flat fee, and they can go. It can be down to like $200 to $10,000. It just depends on the complexity of the plan itself. Then we also had some managed money options where, that was just part of the deal, where you actually you could choose if you got into the managed money, you had the option to choose to also get financial planning, and it was pushed pretty hard. It was a financial planning organization. I know I've said that a couple of times, but that was the key difference. But yeah, no, I'm an advocate for it. I'm going to push for it, and I think it makes sense for us to start going that direction because we're getting very involved in the quality reviews.
I think one of the other things too with our being tied to Deere and the Deere employees at certain especially when you get into a higher net worth executive level individual at certain pay grade levels and up with Deere, they get reimbursed for up to $10,000 a year in financial planning fees. So knowing that up front, being able to structure the planning fee to associate, we'll take a little bit less on the investment management fee and charge a little higher on the planning fee to accommodate somebody so that they can get reimbursed. So we have a little bit of flexibility there, but knowing our market, knowing the clientele of what you have and where the opportunities are, there's definitely tons of opportunities out there to charge for plans.
Tom or Teo, what's yours?
Yeah, I think, we do not charge. I think the primary reason is we try to position it as you're a valued customer of the bank, and this is an additional service that we offer customers. So we haven't really contemplated charging at all. Like I said, our volume is probably relatively low compared to most as a program. The individuals that have done it have found the value in it, and so the incentive, if you will, is the benefit of the additional assets you're gathering. That's what we've thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ken, we're not currently charging either. Although I will say in the last 6 to 12 months, especially before COVID hit, we were getting a lot more members coming in asking for financial plans only. In other words, they were having their investments at Schwab or other wirehouses, but they wanted to work with a financial planner, only other financial planners. So our broker-dealer is able to support that now better. So we are looking in the next probably 12 to 18 months to definitely establish financial plan fees. But most likely we will waive the fee if they have assets with us.
And I'd say,
I guess I have a question for the groups that are charging or have charged. It would seem to me that the expectation or the quality control would have to be even higher than what we're doing today. When you're actually charging the consistency across all the plans that you're charging for, it would almost seem like you need an additional level of monitor and supervision to ensure consistency, that people are getting the same value for the price they're paying.
That's a really good point. And one of the things I just wanted to interject real quick, and then Brad, I'll turn it over to you, is I have a firm that I'm working with that they actually do Incent for planning, but what they do in order to get the quality, they actually have their clients sign an acknowledgement. And so that kind of, I think, helps alleviate some of the, but they're not charging for planning, but they're still, they have a goal and they have the client sign an acknowledgement. So I think that can maybe help a little bit in, and they also do have a supervisory group that's part of their compliance area that is reviewing plans. But I mean, we're talking very, very basic. They're not, just if minimal criteria are being met is all it is. But some of these things, I do think if you're going to incent on planning, I think those are important, things to be considering. Brad, what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
And I think that's where having a full-time planner on staff, that she's the one that's because as we all know, advisors are not good detail and put data people. I don't want that. I don't want one of my advisors, he's the relationship guy. I want the planner doing the work and putting the plan together and working with the advisor and the client. So I think that's been a huge value to us.
That makes sense.
Hey, Tom, our broker-dealer requires that if we give out a plan to the client, that we send it to them for review first. Now, if we're just doing a cash flow and we just keep it on the screen, that requirement is not a requirement. However, if we present the plan and we send the client with a plan home, we are required to send it to the broker-dealer to their financial planning team to review it first.
Wow.
Yeah, going back to what Tom said, we had a whole team that was just there to help with the supervisory, the financial plan compliance of charging. I know it's a catch-22. How and when do you charge, or even how and when do you deliver a plan? Because you don't necessarily know what you can recommend unless you do the plan, right? If you don't charge, then a client or prospect can take your recommendations and implement them elsewhere. And sometimes you rely on advisor intuition on their approach to plan delivery when you don't charge. I think, in a perfect world, which that's what we live in, right? Especially in the year 2020. I would have two systems. I'd have one to charge for non-AWM clients, Arvis Wealth Management, and I would I wouldn't charge for actual AWM clients. Of course, there's a lot of different, gray areas to consider in that approach, but, I think that would make sense again in a perfect world, but.
I'm not sure you understood who these two groups are. You use these initials that I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, AWM, Arvis Wealth Management. So non-AWM Arvis Wealth Management clients.
What's an AWM client? What is it?
Oh,
high
yeah,
end, low end? Huh?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah. So investment assets with us. Because they could be a bank client, right? And they might have a $1,000 checking account, but they don't have any actual investments with us. Maybe they have no plan to have investments with us.
So the thing is really
You're talking about a brokerage client or a not brokerage client. Okay, I think I understand that. Dave?
Yeah. So a few thoughts. So we I think everyone was sharing perspective. Our advisors and the institutions we partner with in the bank channel, they get to make the decision whether they charge or not. So that's at the advisor's discretion. When you charge, there's two different ways we can do it. And the reason I wanted to speak up is I saw a question come in, and I think this will maybe address it from Warren. So two different ways you can charge in our system. One is a flat fee for advice, $3,000 or whatever it is. And you can do that. You can do that annually, quarterly, monthly. You can do it however you want to do it. So you could kind of set it up as a subscription service to some degree. But what a lot of folks are actually choosing to do is couple it together with their asset management fee. So, if you're charging, 100 basis points, you could actually split that fee up and say, well, we're going to charge 40, 50 basis points for asset management, which is really compelling to think about that way when you think about some of what, Schwab and E-Trade and some of the firms or Fidelity are doing with, really low cost managed accounts. You go, look, so we're going to match them, but that's not really where my value comes in. So 40, 50 basis points on the asset management side, and then, 40, 50 basis points for the advice that I'm going to deliver in the comprehensive, plan that we're going to put together for you. And just so the client just sees the 1%, but you talk to them about how you break that up. between the different sort of services you're providing. That's been we introduced that 7-8 years ago. That's been the most sort of rapidly growing way advisors are choosing to charge clients when they choose to charge clients for advice. And then there was another comment that came up around supervision. You're right. So supervision for sure. And we do 350,000 plans for a fee a year as a firm. So we got a big supervision unit, right? And it's not just on the quality of the advice, it's actually on fairness of pricing. So that's a big part, which is to say, if you have two clients that look pretty darn similar and have pretty darn similar goals, it would seem unfair to a regulator for sure that you charge one 3,000, you charge another 1,000, right? So part of what our supervision team's doing is inspecting the complexity of the client and the case relative to the fee charge, relative to what you charge other clients that are similar, to make sure that we don't get ourselves in any hot water with the regulators.
For those of you who do charge, how significant is that as a revenue source? Say a percent of the firm's revenue or a percent of a typical advisor's revenue. Is this trivial, or is this a significant top off of their GDC?
20% for us, Ken.
20%?
20% is the financial planning fee revenue. And then separately, we also consider the value to be much bigger than that because of what it drives from a flows perspective, over controls, a client retention, all that other stuff. But just straight line, it's about 20% GDC.
Yeah. But in addition to that, it probably sends the right message as far as what's important to you as a firm and what the advisor should be focused on and what you deliver to a client. So, 20 is significant, but I would say that it has maybe a bigger impact than just 20 as far as how it positions you in that space.
Yeah, Peter, you're right. And it's the second biggest one after managed account revenue. So, so 20% seems small, but that's because managed account revenue makes up the overwhelming majority, right? If you look at all the other types of revenue, it is the biggest other than managed accounts by a margin. And Peter, you're right. And I think one of the things I've probably said it on one of these webinars before, so I apologize if I've said it, but I really believe, and our stats back this up, that financial planning is the answer to almost any problem you have. So if you have a revenue problem, I promise you financial planning will solve that. If you have a client retention problem, financial planning will solve that. If you have a flows problem, more money's going out than coming in, financial planning will solve that. If you got a referral issue, you don't get enough referrals from your clients, financial planning will solve that. I mean, it's like every single business problem, our stats tell us financial planning answers that problem.
Yeah. But just to follow on that, I think you're absolutely right from that business side. The challenge that it sounds like we have is that for the most part, we have under-resourced the planning activity within the banks and the credit unions. And this in many ways is an opportunity for us to learn and improve upon what our bank or credit union has done in how they position our business. You think about it, and we've talked for years about how our parent bank or credit union hasn't maybe given us the right, enough advisors or enough support staff, or we're not included in enough incentives, and we're not in the branch scorecard enough. All these things, while we're not resourced, we're more of a product instead of having it a core component of the bank or credit union. And now here we're in this situation where we have an investment business, and we're in some essence under-resourcing this important component of our business in a similar way that we're under-resourced as part of the bank. So it's our opportunity, I would say, to learn from the way the bank has managed our businesses and do better than that by giving these businesses the proper technology tools that we need, the proper incentive. I mean, if more than 3/4 of the advisors out there aren't incented on planning, is it a core component of what we do? Can't be, almost by definition. Do we have the centralized planners if we need centralized planners? Do we have the sales managers being paid for planning? Have we really made it a core component of our business? Or are we paying advisors and doing everything else based on short-term commission? Do we meet our profit this month? versus did we deliver what clients want? And I think there's a lot of clients that want planning. You know, Dave's group delivered 350,000 last year. There's a lot of the firms out there delivering plans to clients of your banks and credit unions.
And our research continually shows that assets flow to who does the plan for you. Yeah. So in talking to lots of firms who don't charge, I get a sense that they're timid about doing that. Somehow they don't feel that they can ask. And do you think that it's easier to ask if you have centralized planning and it's not the advisor who's doing the plan, but if we have a centralized thing that maybe it makes more sense to the investor, the consumer, to pay for that, as opposed to the advice you think you should be getting anyway from the person who's making these commissions?
I think there's some truth to that, Ken. I think the bigger challenge is, at least for the advisors that I'm working with now, planning is really a process. It's a completely different sales cycle. It's not a product. And you can't decide you're going to do planning on Tuesdays, but not Thursdays. I do think if you had a centralized group, you can say, I'm going to offload you to this planner and I'm still a relationship person, but it's just you have to wire yourself differently to really adopt it and become a advisor that's going to make planning the core part of your practice. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we face, is getting advisors in many ways to do kind of a 180 in the way that they're selling right now. You know, a sales cycle might go to 2 months as opposed to 2 weeks. And that is a big leap, you know, to some of Peter's point, in the way that we've traditionally kind of operated, or it's monthly budgets or monthly pay cycles or whatever. So there's a lot of factors that go into it, but I think centralized planners help. But I think for most advisors, you have to be willing to adopt the process and do it every day.
What do you think, Brad?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's from a process standpoint, I think that's the biggest piece to it is, you know, we have a centralized full-time planner, and that's we get her engaged at every client level that's doing planning. So the more that she can get engaged with the client and take care of that piece, and let the advisor be the relationship of that, I think that gives with a lot of our advisors that may not be as skilled with the plan itself, that gives the credibility that as she comes in. I've seen her in the mix in a client meeting where, you know, we'll be talking about a Roth conversion and you know, maybe increasing the amount we're going to do on a Roth conversion, and she can hit a couple of buttons and it's up on the screen and what difference that makes in that plan and how it adjusts the plan. You know, when people walk out of that room and they see that, you know, the comments we get back, and even our own CEO of the credit union, his comment to that was, he's like, that just blows me away, the way that you guys can manage through that process. So, but I think that having the process, having the review process, and the planner and the administrative staff, you know, all engaged in line in that working a client through that planning piece, that gives to me, that gives the credibility where we can focus on the value and not let it get into a transactional or pricing type conversation.
Do you have any views on that, Jess?
Well, I'll probably discover this fall because our bank's just launched centralized planning here in probably the last couple of months. Right now, it's just with our trust officers and wealth advisors that are taking use of the centralized team, but there's 4 people on it. So a paraplanner, kind of a half-time person, and then a wealth advisor, 2 wealth advisors that are assisting with the planning. But right now, as I do talk to the financial advisors, it's how to engage with that centralized team. Are they better off creating the plan themselves so then they understand the plan? Or are they better at somehow gathering the information, handing it off to someone else that can create it, but then they're not as in tune with the plan as if they are constructing it themselves? So it's kind of that 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But you know, as far as the amount of time that it takes to create a great plan, you know, we'll figure out how to get it done from a centralized standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ken, I was just going to jump in there on the topic of centralized planning. So, you know, Fidelity put out, you know, their research earlier this year on something they call their wealth maturity model. And basically there is this concept of advanced planner firms, and those are the firms that are furthest along the maturity curve. They're really optimizing their planning practice. And what they found when they actually went into those firms and reviewed them is 9 in 10 utilize a central planning team. And when they had that central planning team in place and, you know, had that structure, it allowed them for more time and energy to focus on the client experience and not just the processes as an advisor. And so they had greater productivity, they had deeper client engagement and expertise, and their bandwidth was really allowing them to focus on what's important. So I think it's just interesting, you know, that research that they put out there and how we're seeing people talk about centralized planning firms, just what that gives the advisor the ability to do. I know from an e-money perspective, I touched on this last time we talked, Lee and Ken, but you know, we are working and we've implemented a pilot for outsourced planning. So we're actually doing financial planning for some advisors and firms and helping take on that work at e-money. So it's just interesting to see how, you know, that improves the advisor's productivity.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly, can you touch on how e-money can help that void for, like, for example, I just mentioned if the advisor doesn't do the plan, that they aren't as in tune to it, or with that scenario. I mean, that would be difficult for, that is the difficult piece of when you outsource planning. How do you guys solve for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if Connor's on the line, he can probably jump into that question because he's really been involved in the outsourced planning pilot. So I'm not sure if he's there, or he could jump in quickly.
Connor should be coming online any minute.
I just know that a lot of folks are going to want to, you know, I mean, it's a really interesting question that I think a lot of people would be thinking about, right? Hey, Connor.
How are you? So just to add a little bit of color to that, you know, we are working on our outsourced planning pilot right now, and it is one of the more difficult parts in transitioning the plan back to the advisor and reintroducing them to not just the fact pattern itself, but some of the objectives as well as recommendations that we're uncovering as part of our build. So we do a full intake. We request, you know, we have a fact finder built out that we continue to use as a silent partner, you know, regardless of whether you're talking about the platform or the outsourced planning services. We are completely white labeled. So from the client experience standpoint, they don't know at all that somebody else is building the plan. So we go through, enter the facts, go through the planning pieces or the planning modules or goals that the advisor has called out as initiatives that they've, you know, uncovered with their client during fact finding. And as we go back in to reintroduce the entire plan to them, we walk them through, you know, some niche spots, making notes on different fact items and how it might turn out a little bit differently than what they had originally anticipated. And we are also giving them some ideas on other conversations that they might want to have. So we're both doing the plan kind of for them, but also kind of in conjunction with them, and then handing it back off to them to deliver the pieces that they found important to the client.
So it almost sounds like you're even doing some coaching to some extent, right?
A little bit, yeah, especially as it pertains to, you know, best practices through the platform and best places to have, you know, specific topical discussions.
I just think it's a really, I think it's important that the planning get done. And so there's a lot of places that they just don't have the resources, the training to be able to do that. So to have a potential resource, I think could help a lot of firms, especially smaller ones.
Tim, can you tell if Chris Loneker's on the line from First Horizon? He might want to jump in here if he is, because they have essentially bifurcated planning from advisors. Planning is done centrally, and it has nothing to do with revenue generation. And the planner presents the plan to the client. I think the advisor's in the room, although Chris was able to can undoubtedly explain it better than I can.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to have joined us today, Ken.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Well, and then the other thing that's interesting about their structure is they also charge for planning.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Again, on a kind of a sliding scale, depending on what your how many times how often the advisor meets with them, or how often the planner meets with the individual. Let's shift gears here as we're getting into the home stretch. And we did have one question again from our friend Richard Federer from Fort Lee, New Jersey. Richard Federer writes, "I see all these studies that show that advisors who do more planning capture more assets and produce more. And revenue from planning clients is much higher than from other clients." Several people have mentioned that so far in this call. But Richard says, "Aren't advisors who do more planning more experienced, have longer tenure, are focused on a smaller client base, and so they have more assets anyway? And aren't wealthier folks more likely to have a plan because they need to plan more, and they have a bullseye on their back because every planner wants their business? Isn't this a classic case of post hoc ergo propter hoc?" Well, Richard, I didn't know you knew Latin, but this is an issue that, of course, we've been concerned about at Kehrer Bielan for some time, because in fact, it is a problem of whether, when you see that an advisor gets twice as much revenue from a planning client than a non-planning client, is that really because of the plan, because of all these underlying factors? So we decided naturally to look into that. Tim, do you want to put that slide on the screen? We are working with Lee. We've assembled a database of almost 1,400 advisors from 34 banks and credit unions. And we used that database to essentially estimate how much an advisor would produce based upon all these various factors. Factors like age, tenure, the size of the branch territory, the size of the book, the number of clients they have, the assets they have under management, and the composition of those assets, whether they have a sales assistant, whether they are part of a team, and of course, how much planning they do. And on the next slide, you can see that essentially that model was able to explain 96% of the variation in GDC across advisors. In other words, it only failed to explain 4% of the differences. So it's very strong prediction of what an advisor would produce. So then we took that data and we took the mean values of all those factors, age, tenure, branch territory, and so on, and we varied the number of plans an advisor did from 0 to 1 every 4 months, to 1 every 2 months, to 1 a month, to 2 a month, and so on, up to 7 a month, and saw what their production was. So what this chart does is isolates the impact of doing a plan from all the other factors that could influence what GDC is. And Richard, as you can see, it tells a very strong story about how planning accelerates production as you do more planning. At first, there's very little gains from doing additional planning. When you go from a plan every 4 months to 1 a month to 2 a month. But once you get past 4 or 5 or 6, you get a dramatic escalation in the impact of planning. How does that happen? Well, I think that you keep clients longer, you can go deeper with them, you get more referrals from them, and that accumulates as you become more of a holistic advisor as opposed to someone who dabbles in planning. Any comments on this?
I mean, I like the research, and it kind of showcases my existing bias that says one who's fully committed to planning, they'll have higher revenue. Nothing like confirmation bias to help your mind expand and grow. But no, I think this is certainly compelling.
And most importantly, it says that, you know, we've taken all these other factors into account. So this really does help to significantly isolate the impact of planning. And it also allows you, using this model, to take a particular advisor and change, instead of choosing the mean values of all those factors, use the advisor's values. What is their size of their deposit territory? What's their asset base? What's how much of those assets are advisory assets, and so on. Plug those into the model and then say, gee, you're currently doing 1.5 plans a month. Look what would happen to you if you went to 4.
Ken, I think this is interesting, and I'm not sure I fully understand all of it on the slide, but how do you explain the 6 plans to 7? I mean, that's a huge jump. It's kind of a gradual all the way up, and that makes sense. Incrementally more plans, it should help. But how do you explain going from 6 plans to 7 plans, giving you an increase of almost 600,000?
Well, on the one hand, it's what the data say, and you can see that's the result of essentially that exponential curve. It starts slowly, but it's growing at a rapid rate, right? And the other question there is that among these 1,600 advisors, there are probably only 40 who are 7 or more. So it's very few advisors. But on the other hand, their average production is really high. So, but I think
that's the top 1%, essentially.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting.
But it's able to isolate the other factors from the way those top 1% are different otherwise.
So just a quick comment, and I think if I were looking at this, I might almost say, if I'm, managing a firm, to say, well, let's set my goal for 7 or 8, right? Because if I can get my folks to do that, then maybe, we would be able to make progress towards these numbers. So I just thought I'd throw out here, right, this is a good time to say, the first initial goal, if you don't have a goal for planning, I think a really reasonable initial goal is to start at 4 per month. I know many firms have done that and had really great success. And then just even to not only set the goal, but then to help them understand who those clients are. Because I have seen other firms say, okay, here's our goal, and just kind of go to it. But yet maybe their regional managers need more support in helping to coach their teams to be able to achieve those goals. Because I think goals are, having an expectation, because I think that an expectation, whether it's, you can do that a lot of different ways. You can do it through the recognition, through incenting, all of these, however you're going to do it, but you have to have that culture, which I'm gonna nod back over to Ben there, saying, I think it's a top down, bottom up. You got to create the culture, and then I think you're going to see these results, but you also have to have the expectations and the accountability. But I just, for those who might not currently have any initial, goals out there, I just wanted to encourage you to maybe start somewhere that is achievable, because if you shoot too high, you're going to just get a tremendous amount of garbage plans. So I just thought I'd throw that out there.
But I would think that you'd want to have individualized goals. If someone's at 3, giving them a goal of 4, maybe you'd want to give them a goal of 5, right?
Right.
And using data like this to show them what the impact would be if they do that. And clearly you're trying to get all those zeros, or especially all those who are kind of under 1 in the chart we started with, when I think more than half the advisors do less than 1 a month, right? Get them to go to 3, but I guess you got to do 2 before you do 3, right? So.
Well, and I think that's where, David, your mention of a business plan, I think is, I think that would fit very well with that individual goal setting, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the key to unlock it all, in my opinion, is not trying to mandate anything of the individual advisor, but just say, look, let's talk about how you're going to help achieve your revenue goals. And we just happen to know this is one of the most significant levers that you can pull, and our internal research matches, exactly what y'all just showed up there. And I think the one thing that we help control for is we look at flows after a planning relationship. So that controls for how much money they have, because we know clients that weren't in a planning relationship that then get engaged in a planning relationship bring on significant new money on average, which to some degree I don't care whether it's a client that didn't have any money with us and now has a bunch, or they already had a bunch, now they have a lot more. Every dollar counts. So it all works for us.
Mm-hmm. Looks like we're coming to the end of our time. Any other final comments from anyone?
Hey, I will say I do appreciate the research you guys provide. And Lee and I have talked about this a little bit. But is there a way, and again, I don't expect you to have an answer on this today, but just in general, we'd like to see, I'd like to see how client retention is impacted by planning relationships. It'd be cool to be able to see AUM, assets under management, with financial planning clients versus non-financial planning clients. Also, the average number of services per households engaged through planning relative to the non-planning relationships. I think those would be pretty compelling stats to take. These are nice too, and I'm going to use these stats. I'm going to use them right away. I always do. But if I had those stats, that would be pretty compelling.
Yeah, Ben, I like that idea. One more that I'd love to see is what insurance revenue production is like for clients that are engaged with planning. Because it would seem natural that if you're doing a solid plan and the risk management is a big component of that, your insurance revenue per client, or your insurance from those advisors engaged in planning, should be much higher than your average advisor.
Yep, that's a good one.
Yeah, that piece is covered by the study that the chart that we were just looking at comes from, which is a study that was sponsored by Raymond James last year. And then to Ben's question, Ben, the challenge is that a lot of banks don't have the answers to those questions, right? They couldn't tell us in their own experience. So to get at that, we actually survey clients and talk to clients about, okay, do you have a financial plan? Where is it from? Then we're able to compare clients that have a financial plan from their bank or credit union against bank and credit union customers that don't. And we are able to calculate things like how much more of the household assets go to the bank once the plan is in place. How much does their loyalty to the bank and to the advisor go up once the plan is in place? So that's also in a different study, and I'll send it to you offline.
And how many services of the bank and the broker dealer do you use, and that kind of thing? What differences between planning clients and non-planning clients? Well, let me close by thanking our sponsors again, Ameriprise Financial Institutions Group and eMoney Advisors. We really appreciate your support. And again, thanks to Terrapin for bringing us today's virtual roundtable. And thank you to everyone around the table for your contributions, and to all of you who signed on. And hopefully that you'll find this a useful 90 minutes of your time. Our next financial planning meeting will be October 22nd, when Legal will be introducing Planning Insights, a webinar to introduce our new annual service benchmarking advisor by advisor financial planning activity, where that sort of first chart came from. That study is being sponsored by Incent. But next up, the Kehrer Bielan leadership study group is launching this fall. Again, being reimagined as a set of virtual conversations. The first one will be October 15th, partnering with bankers. And you'll check your inbox. We'll be sending you some information soon. Thanks everybody. Have a good evening.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.